I'm a 14-year-old male, and I currently live in Denmark. As some of you may know, Denmark has a very low crime rate, so the area I live in is very safe. I was home alone on a Saturday night. Both of my parents were out working, my dad in the United States, while my mom was working overnight. I was typically alone with my brother, Jake. Jake was off in his room fast asleep. I, on the other hand, was at my desk playing your typical World War II games. Usually at night, I keep my window open, as the summers in Denmark can get really hot. I was sitting down, getting ready to close my computer, when I heard a crunch of a twig coming from outside. At first I thought it might be a dog or a cat. I know it sounds stupid to think a dog would have been wandering around in my yard, but when you're in situations like these, you tend to think of more logical explanations for things, even if they are in a creepy setting like the one I was in. So of course, I brushed off the noise and I went to lay in my bed. It was not another 2 minutes after I'd gotten into my bed that I hear the same crunch again. I was kind of getting annoyed, so I told myself the next time there's a crunch from outside, I would go and scare off the dog, or whatever it was. Sure enough, I heard it again. I opened my curtains to discover in horror that it wasn't an animal at all. It was a man. I couldn't really see much of his face. All I could see was his two eyes staring directly at me. I quickly shoved the curtains back and ran to wake up my brother. I told my brother what was going on, and he started to freak out. We both went back into my room to see if he was still there. We peeked through the curtains, and he wasn't there. Before I continue, I need to describe the layout of my house. As soon as you enter my house, there are two hallways, one straight ahead and one to the right. The one straight ahead leads to the laundry room, 2 bedrooms, an office, and a bathroom. The one to the right leads to the kitchen. In the kitchen there are 3 doors, one to the left, one straight ahead, and one to the right. The one to the left is a sunroom, where most of the walls are made of glass. The forward one leads to the living room, whilst the last door, to the right, leads to a small hallway, where mine and my brother's bedrooms are. Now, once we checked and saw that he wasn't there, we started to freak out. The man could be anywhere. My brother and I decided to go to the kitchen. As we approached the kitchen, we looked to our right to discover, in our horror, the man staring at us from outside the sunroom window. My brother let out a scream, and I could faintly see that the man had what I can only describe to be the most evil grin I had ever seen. I quickly grabbed my phone from the counter and began dialing my mom. As soon as I began dialing, he must have seen me. You would think that he would have run away, but no, the man tried to tug at the doorknob, so I rushed my brother into my room before locking it behind me. I then heard a sound I will never forget, a sound that still gives me nightmares to this day. I heard the sound of glass shattering. The man was in our house. My mom wasn't picking up her phone, and I began to dial 112, the equivalent to 911. I told the dispatcher what was going on and what was happening. I heard the man walking through my house, through the kitchen, through the hallway, through my brother's bedroom. His footsteps stopped at my door. My brother started to whimper. Then the doorknob started to turn. I was so scared in that moment. In that moment, I thought this was it. I was going to die. The man stood there for around a minute, before just walking off and out the front door. I must have waited 10 minutes before going out to check. He was gone. He just left. Then my brother tugged my arm, nudging me to look. There was a note on my door. The note read, "This won't be the last time we meet." The cops finally showed up, took our statements, and called our mother. She was there in about 15 minutes, and then we told her what had happened. The police advised us to stay away from the house and to stay with family or friends for a few days. So we did. We stayed with our grandmother. The intruder who entered our house was never caught. We ended up moving out of the house that very month due to me not being able to sleep there and having constant nightmares about that event. Lately, I have been talking to people, from psychologists to my school counselor. I still have a few questions flowing through my mind. Why did the man just leave like that? What were his intentions? What would have happened if my door wasn't locked? Or what if I had never heard him outside? My name is Walter, and I'm 23. This story is about my schizophrenic meth-head neighbor who was trying to kill me. A little backstory. I live 30 minutes north of Houston, Texas, where there are more drugs than people. My best friend Jeff lives across the street from me, along with his kids, wife, father, and his older brother John. When John was around 8 or 9 years old, he had a brain tumor and had surgery to remove it. This had a negative impact on his brain. I started hanging out with him when I was around 17 or 18, and John was around 27 or 28. I used to get him to buy me cigarettes and beer, because I was underage at the time. In exchange, I'd drink a few beers and smoke a few joints with him. I started noticing he would laugh at nothing, and talk to someone else when I was the only other one in the room. I found out it was schizophrenia. He had just never seen a doctor about it. I should also mention that John likes to stay up for weeks on meth. This stayed pretty consistent over the years, but let's fast forward to the past month or so. John finally got a girl to spend some time with him, if you catch my drift, after 10 years of being alone. Her name was Ashley. Ashley is known around town as a meth head, and for being very promiscuous. John falls in love with her pretty fast, even with me and Jeff warning him about how she is. Then she disappeared on him after a few days. One day I go over to his house, which is a small house on Jeff's property that is separate from the main house, and he is smoking meth. I spark up a joint and start talking to him. He proceeds to tell me he's been up there for days, and that the night before he saw Ashley trying to get into his house, but there were several guys stopping her and pulled her away. Apparently, I was one of them, because he heard my voice, which was impossible, because Jeff and I were watching the Daredevil show inside the main house, and we would have heard all the noise and apparent yelling. I explain all this to him, while he is still getting high, and then I leave. He goes to work, and at around midnight I hear yelling from across the street. I go over, and it's John freaking out. Jeff and I try to calm him down, and he later says that he could hear me and her having sex from the vents at his job, which is physically impossible because it's over 2 miles away from our street. I explain this to him, and tell him it's just the meth, and that I haven't seen her in months. But he doesn't budge. The next few days he's still doing meth and hearing things. One morning, about a week or two ago, I woke up to a lot of missed calls from Karen, Jeff's wife, and Jeff. I call Karen back first because she called more times and I thought it was an emergency. She asks me, "When's the last time you saw Ashley?" "Months ago, walking down Ford Road," I respond. "Well, John is freaking out saying he saw you chasing her into the woods behind our neighborhood," she says. "That's not possible. I just woke up. I know he's been hearing things, and I guess he's seeing things now," I say. "Yeah, he needs to get off that shit. Just be careful. He came into the kitchen and tried to make some homemade mace out of cayenne pepper. He's got a knife on him, and he's riding around on his bike. He says he's going to stab you if he finds you, she tells me. I respond with, "Thanks for letting me know, Karen," and get off the phone with her and call Jeff, who tells me the same thing his wife just told me. I then go over to my other friend's house a couple of streets over to get away from all this. I drink some beer and smoke some weed while I'm there, and sort of forget about it because I'm quite inebriated. That is, until I got on my street and see John pedaling towards me on his bike. As he's in front of me, he throws a powder at me, which I'm assuming is the cayenne pepper. Luckily for me, he missed, wildly. I yell, "What the fuck do you think you're doing, John?" But I made it home without seeing him again. The next few days were uneventful, and I was hoping he would realize that what he saw wasn't real. But I was wrong. I was hanging out with Jeff watching The Walking Dead, and I go out to smoke a cigarette. When I was about halfway done with it, John comes up behind me and puts me in a chokehold. I have pretty quick reflexes, so with all my weight I stomp on his foot, and he lets go. I only weigh about 160 pounds, but I'm sure it hurt like hell. He's on the ground in pain, and I say, "John, get off the meth. What you saw wasn't real. If it was, don't you think someone would have called the cops and I would be in jail?" He yells, "No, I know you heard her. I saw and heard everything. I'm going to kill you." He limped off in pain, and I haven't seen him since. That was a few days ago, so I know it isn't over. I can't leave my house without carrying my throwing knife or constantly looking over my shoulder, which is ridiculous. I don't want him to be in trouble with the law, because despite all of this, he was my friend, and his family is my family. I hope he gets off the meth and gets help for his schizophrenia, for my sake and his. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check out the description for information on how to submit your stories. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.